The fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against the porcelain plate, the sound echoing through the upscale restaurant like a gunshot. Every head turned toward our table, but I barely registered the curious stares. My entire world had narrowed to three things: the waiter standing beside us, the navy blue jacket draped over his arm, and Charles's face draining of color like someone had pulled a plug. "Your jacket, sir," the waiter repeated, his professional smile wavering as he extended the garment toward Charles. "You left this here last night. Table 12, 9:30 reservation." Last night. The words ricocheted inside my skull. Last night when Charles had called me at 8, his voice strained and apologetic, explaining how his boss had sprung an emergency meeting on him. Last night when I'd fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him, waking only when I heard his key in the lock at 11:15. Last night when he'd kissed my forehead and whispered that he was exhausted, smelling faintly of coffee and printer ink, except Charles was already wearing a jacket. The black leather one I'd bought him for his birthday 3 months ago. The one he'd put on this morning before we left for brunch. The one that was currently hugging his shoulders while this navy blue stranger hung in the space between us like an accusation. I watched Charles's throat work as he swallowed. Once. Twice. His eyes darted from the waiter to the jacket to the pristine white tablecloth, anywhere but my face. When he finally spoke, his voice came out strangled and small. "There must be some confusion." The waiter's smile tightened. His nameplate read Stephen, and Stephen looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. "No confusion, sir. The reservation was under your name. Charles Whitmore. You requested our private corner booth." Private corner booth. The phrase settled over me like ice water. This wasn't our first time at Marcello's. We came here for special occasions, anniversaries, celebrations, but we'd never sat in the private section. That area was reserved for people who wanted discretion, intimacy, secrecy. My hands found the edge of the table, gripping hard enough that my knuckles went white. "Charles was at work last night," I heard myself say, and even to my own ears the statement sounded hollow, desperate. "He had a late meeting." Stephen's expression shifted into something resembling pity, and that look gutted me more than anything else could have. He'd seen this scene play out before, probably dozens of times. The confronted partner, the incriminating evidence, the terrible dawning realization. "Perhaps you'd like to check the jacket, sir?" Stephen suggested gently, directing his words at me now. "There might be something in the pockets that could clear this up." Charles moved then, faster than I'd seen him move in months. His hand shot out, snatching the jacket from Stephen's arm with enough force to make the waiter step back. "That won't be necessary," Charles said, his voice suddenly sharp with authority. "Thank you for returning it. You can go now." But I was already standing, my chair scraping backward with an ugly screech. Around us, conversations died. Silverware paused midair. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. "Show me," I said quietly. Charles clutched the jacket against his chest like a shield. "Mason, please, not here. Let's go home and talk about this privately." "Show me the jacket, Charles." Something in my tone must have convinced him that resistance was futile. His shoulders sagged and he slowly extended the navy fabric toward me. I took it, my hands surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. The material was expensive, cashmere blend, softer than anything Charles typically wore. As I held it up, a scent wafted toward me. Cologne. Yes, the same brand Charles used. But underneath it, woven through it like a secret message, was something else. Perfume. Floral and sweet, with notes of jasmine and vanilla. Nothing I owned. Nothing I would ever wear. I reached into the right pocket. Empty. The left pocket yielded a crumpled receipt. I smoothed it out against the table, aware that Stephen had quietly retreated but was watching from near the kitchen doors, probably wondering if he should call security. The receipt was from Marcello's. Last night's date stamped clearly at the top, table 12. 2 orders of the sea bass special. A bottle of Chateau Margaux, the same wine Charles and I had shared on our first anniversary because it cost $200 and we'd felt wildly extravagant. 2 tiramisu desserts. The total came to $473. "We shared the sea bass," Charles whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. My head snapped up. "What?" His eyes were glassy now, brimming with tears that hadn't yet fallen. "Last night, we both ordered it because you always say it's the best thing on the menu. I wanted to I thought if I took him somewhere you loved, somewhere that meant something to us, maybe I could figure out what I was doing, why I kept going back to him. The confession hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled, catching myself against the table. The receipt fluttered from my fingers and landed face up on my half-eaten eggs Benedict. Him, I repeated numbly. You keep saying him. Charles's face crumpled. A single tear tracked down his cheek and disappeared into the collar of his shirt. My shirt, actually. One he'd borrowed so many times it had become his. Mason, I swear I was going to tell you. I've been trying to find the words for weeks. Weeks? The word tasted like ash. How many weeks, Charles? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. I could see it written in every line of his guilty face, in the way he couldn't maintain eye contact for more than a second, in the trembling of his hands as they still gripped that damning jacket. Around us, the restaurant had given up any pretense of not watching. An elderly woman at the table nearest to ours had her hand pressed to her mouth. A young couple by the window leaned into each other, whispering. Our waiter, not Stephen, our actual waiter, whose name I'd never learned, hovered uncertainly near the bar, our check probably burning a hole in his apron. I pulled my wallet from my back pocket and extracted 3 20s, dropping them on the table without counting, without caring if it was enough or too much. My vision had gone strange and tunnel-like, everything outside of Charles fading into irrelevant blur. I'm leaving now, I said, and my voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Don't follow me. Don't call me. Don't show up at the apartment. Mason, please. How long? I cut him off, the words erupting with sudden violence. Just tell me that much. How long have you been lying to me? Charles's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Then, so quietly I had to strain to hear, 2 months. 2 months. 60 days of kisses that tasted like betrayal. 60 nights of him sliding into bed beside me, his skin still warm from someone else's touch. 60 mornings of I love you that meant nothing. Nothing, nothing. I turned and walked out of Marcello's without looking back, leaving Charles standing alone among the ruins of our brunch. Our relationship, our entire shared history. The navy jacket lay abandoned on the floor between our tables, a puddle of evidence neither of us wanted to claim. Behind me I heard Charles call my name one more time, his voice breaking on the second syllable. I kept walking. The apartment building's hallway had never felt longer. Each step toward my door seemed to stretch into infinity, my keys growing heavier in my pocket until I finally stopped trying and just sat down right there on the grimy carpet outside Unit 4C. My back pressed against the wall, knees drawn up, head tilted back until I was staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles. Inside that apartment were 4 years of accumulated life. Our life. The throw pillows Charles had insisted on buying despite my protests that they were impractical. His collection of vintage vinyl records that took up an entire bookshelf, the coffee maker we'd splurged on last Christmas, the one that ground beans fresh each morning and filled the kitchen with that rich, dark aroma that meant home. The bed we'd picked out together, arguing playfully about firmness levels until the saleswoman had diplomatically suggested we test them both again. How was I supposed to walk into that space now, knowing what I knew? How was I supposed to sleep in that bed, sit on that couch, use that coffee maker, without seeing Charles with someone else, without imagining all the times he'd come home late, smelling like shower gel and claiming exhaustion, when really he'd been washing away evidence? My phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. I ignored it. Buzzed again. Again. By the 7th buzz I yanked it out and glanced at the screen. 14 missed calls. 23 text messages. All Charles. The most recent message previewed on my lock screen. Mason, please come home so I can explain. I'm begging you, this isn't what you think it is. I can make you understand, just give me 5 minutes, please. No punctuation. Pure panic, compressed into one desperate run-on sentence. I should have felt satisfaction at his distress. Instead, I felt nothing, just a vast echoing emptiness where my emotions used to be. I was about to silence the phone entirely when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, hesitant footsteps that stopped just before reaching my floor. Then a voice, quiet and uncertain. Excuse me? Are you Mason? I looked up sharply. A guy stood 3 steps down, one hand on the railing, the other shoved deep in his jacket pocket. He was maybe mid-20s, with light brown hair that curled slightly at the ends and nervous energy radiating off him like heat waves. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater that looked expensive, and when our eyes met, his face flooded with color. "Who's asking?" I managed, my voice rough from unshed tears. He climbed the last few steps slowly, moving like someone approaching a wild animal. "My name is Jacob," he said, "and I really think we need to talk." Jacob. The name meant nothing to me, but something in his expression, guilty and terrified and desperately earnest all at once, made my stomach drop. I knew before he said another word. I knew with absolute certainty. "You're him," I said flatly. "The person Charles was with." Jacob flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Yes," he whispered. "But it's not what you're thinking. Could we maybe go inside? I don't want to have this conversation in the hallway." The laugh that burst from my throat was ugly and sharp. "You've got some nerve showing up here. What, did Charles send you to do his dirty work? To convince me he's sorry and I should take him back?" "No." Jacob's eyes widened in genuine shock. "Charles doesn't know I'm here. He'd kill me if he found out. I came because—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Because you deserve to know the truth. The real truth, not whatever sanitized version Charles is probably texting you right now." My phone buzzed again as if on cue. I stared at Jacob, trying to read him. He didn't look like a liar. He looked scared and guilty, and somehow sad, like he was carrying a weight that didn't entirely belong to him. Against every instinct screaming at me to slam the door in his face. Metaphorically speaking, since we were still in the hallway, I pulled out my keys. 10 minutes, I said. "Then you leave." Relief washed over Jacob's features. "Thank you. I know this is weird and awful and you have every right to hate me, but I promise I'm not here to make excuses. I just want you to have all the information." I unlocked the door and walked inside, not bothering to check if he followed. The apartment looked exactly as we'd left it this morning. Coffee mugs in the sink. Yesterday's newspaper still spread across the kitchen counter. Charles's running shoes kicked off haphazardly by the door. Evidence of a normal Sunday morning, completely oblivious to the detonation about to destroy everything. Jacob closed the door behind him softly and stood there awkwardly, clearly unsure whether to sit or remain standing. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet, filled it with water I didn't want, and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Talk," I said. He perched on the edge of the couch, hands clasped between his knees. "I met Charles 2 months ago at a bar in the West Village. The Stonewall Inn, actually. I'd gone with friends, and he was there alone, and we just started talking." Each word felt like a needle under my skin. 2 months ago, Charles and I had celebrated our 4-year anniversary with a weekend trip to the Catskills. We'd hiked and made love in a cabin with a fireplace and talked about maybe getting a dog next year when his work schedule calmed down. Apparently, the very next weekend he'd been picking up guys in bars. "He was charming," Jacob continued quietly, staring at his hands. "Funny and smart and attentive. He asked about my job, my hobbies, seemed genuinely interested. When he suggested we get dinner the following week, I said yes." "Did he tell you he had a boyfriend?" The question came out harder than intended. Jacob shook his head miserably. "Not at first. We went on 3 dates before I found out, and only because I saw a text notification pop up on his phone while he was in the bathroom. From you. It said, 'Love you, can't wait until you get home.'" The memory of that text rose up unbidden. I'd sent it during my lunch break at work, sitting at my desk and feeling spontaneously affectionate. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. "When I confronted him," Jacob said, "he told me you two were basically over, that you'd been growing apart for months, that the relationship was dead but neither of you knew how to let go. He said you were emotionally unavailable, that you worked too much and never made time for him anymore." My grip on the water glass tightened until I worried it might shatter. "That's bullshit. Complete bullshit. We were fine. We had problems, sure. Every couple does. But we were working on them. We were happy." "I believe you," Jacob said simply, "because last night at the restaurant when the waiter came by and asked if we were celebrating anything special, Charles got this look on his face. Devastated. Like someone had punched him. And he said your name. He said Mason would love this place. We came here for our first anniversary." The glass did slip then, tumbling from my fingers and shattering against the tile floor. Water and broken glass spread across the kitchen, glittering like scattered stars. I didn't move, didn't bend down to clean up the mess, just stared at the fragments of glass catching the afternoon light streaming through the window, thinking about how perfectly they represented everything that used to be whole and intact in my life. Jacob stood immediately, looking around for something to clean with. "Where do you keep your broom?" "Closet by the bathroom," I heard myself say mechanically. "But leave it. Just finish what you came to say." He sat back down slowly, eyes never leaving my face. "After Charles said your name like that, like you were something precious he'd broken, I started putting things together. All the times he couldn't stay over because he had early meetings. The way he never invited me to his place, how his phone was always face down when we were together. I asked him point blank, 'Are you still with Mason?' What did he say?" "He said it was complicated." Jacob's voice dripped with disgust. That word that people use when they want to avoid responsibility. Complicated. As if lying to two people simultaneously is just some complex philosophical fable instead of a choice he made every single day. I finally moved, walking carefully around the broken glass to collapse into the armchair across from him. My legs felt boneless, incapable of holding me upright any longer. "So you knew he was cheating, and you kept seeing him anyway." The accusation hung between us, sharp and cutting. Jacob didn't flinch from it. "Yes," he admitted, "and I'm not proud of that. But he was convincing, Mason. He'd talk about how you two barely spoke anymore, how you came home from work and disappeared into your laptop for hours. He showed me texts where you'd canceled date nights because of deadlines. He made it sound like you'd already checked out of the relationship emotionally, even if you hadn't officially ended things. So, in his version, I'm the villain. The realization shouldn't have stung, but it did. I'm the neglectful boyfriend who drove him into someone else's arms." "That's exactly how he framed it," Jacob confirmed. "And like an idiot, I believed him. I thought I was helping him transition out of a dying relationship into something healthier. I thought," his voice cracked, "I thought maybe we could actually build something real once he finally left you." "But he wasn't planning to leave me, was he?" Jacob shook his head, and now there were tears on his face, tracking silently down his cheeks. "No. That's what I realized last night. After he said your name with so much pain in his voice, I pushed him, asked when he was going to tell you about us, when we could stop hiding, and he looked at me like I'd suggested something insane. He said he loved you, that he'd always love you, that what we had was just temporary." Temporary. Another knife to add to my collection. I was accumulating quite the arsenal. "He's been planning to end it with me," Jacob continued, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. "Not with you. With me. He was going to ghost me. Just stop responding calls and texts until I got the message. But he wanted to do it in a way that wouldn't create drama or risk you finding out." "Then why are you here?" I asked. "If he was going to end it anyway, why tell me?" Jacob met my gaze directly for the first time since entering the apartment. His eyes were red-rimmed but clear, filled with a determination that hadn't been there before. "Because you're being played, Mason. Charles isn't trying to choose between us. He's trying to keep us both. He wants you as his stable, comfortable home base, and me as his exciting secret. And he's been setting things up so that when everything inevitably explodes, you'll blame yourself for not being enough." The words landed like physical blows. I thought about all of Charles's recent behavior, the way he'd been more attentive lately, bringing home flowers unexpectedly, suggesting we take a couple's cooking class together. I thought he was being sweet, romantic. Now I saw it for what it was: guilt management, insurance policy, building up enough goodwill that I might forgive him when the truth came out. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "How can you be sure about his intentions?" "Because I went through his phone," Jacob admitted without shame. "Last night after dinner when he went to pay the bill, I unlocked it. I'd seen his passcode before, and I found everything. Messages to you full of love and plans for the future. Messages to his friends, complaining about how I was getting too clingy and he needed to find a clean exit. Messages to his therapist. Yeah, he's been seeing someone where he talked about wanting to have his cake and eat it too." My therapist brain kicked in automatically. The part of me that had spent years studying human behavior in graduate school. Compartmentalization. Classic narcissistic pattern. The ability to maintain separate realities for different people, never letting the walls between them break down. "Did you take screenshots?" I asked. Jacob pulled out his phone. Every single one. I know it was a violation of privacy, but I figured you deserved proof. Otherwise, it's just my word against his. And he's very good at making people believe him. He handed me the phone and I scrolled through image after image of Charles's duplicity laid bare in text form. Messages to me from 3 days ago. You're my whole world, Mason. Don't ever forget that. Messages to his best friend from the same day. I know I should end it with Jacob. But the sex is incredible and M has been so stressed with work lately. Barely touches me anymore. My hands started shaking. I thrust the phone back at Jacob before I could read any more. Before I could see myself reduced to initials and complaints. My 4 years of love and commitment dismissed as insufficient. There's something else, Jacob said quietly. Something I heard him tell his therapist in one of the voicemails I listened to. Like he said he was planning to manufacture a breakup. To create a situation you'd be the one to end things, so he could play the victim. Tell everyone you abandoned him during a difficult time, that you were too career-focused to prioritize the relationship. The jacket, I whispered. He left it on purpose. I think so. When we left the restaurant he had it with him. I remember because I said it matched his eyes. But when we got outside he realized he'd forgotten it and said he'd grab it another time. He was laying groundwork, creating evidence that could be discovered accidentally. The calculation of it stole my breath. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake born from unhappiness. This was strategy. Charles had choreographed my heartbreak. 3 days passed in a blur of silence and stillness. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done in 5 years at the firm. My boss sounded concerned, told me to take all the time I needed. I wondered what he'd say if I told him the truth. That I was falling apart because the person I'd built my entire adult life around had been systematically dismantling it while I smiled and nodded and planned our future. Jacob had left after showing me the screenshots, promising he wouldn't contact Charles again and leaving his number in case I needed to talk. I hadn't called, hadn't done much of anything except sit in the growing darkness of the apartment as day cycled into night and back again. The broken glass still littered the kitchen floor. Every time I thought about cleaning it up, I'd remember why it was there and the energy would drain from my body like water from a cracked vessel. On the 4th morning someone knocked on my door. Not the tentative tap of a neighbor or delivery person, but a deliberate, rhythmic sound that suggested the knocker intended to keep going until I answered. I ignored it. The knocking continued. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Finally, more from irritation than curiosity, I dragged myself upright and shuffled to the door. Through the peephole I saw Charles standing in the hallway, his arms full of red roses, at least 3 dozen of them. Maybe more. My favorite flower, though I'd only mentioned that once, years ago when we'd walked past a flower shop on our second date. I opened the door but positioned myself in the frame, making it clear he wasn't invited inside. Charles looked terrible. His eyes were swollen and bloodshot. His usual carefully styled hair flat and lifeless. His clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them. Part of me, the part that had loved him for 4 years, wanted to reach out and smooth the wrinkle in his collar. The rest of me wanted to slam the door in his face. Mason, he breathed. And the relief in his voice was palpable. Thank God. I've been so worried. You haven't answered any of my calls or texts. And I thought maybe you'd. He stopped himself, but I knew what he'd been about to say. Thought maybe I'd done something drastic. The concern would have been touching if it wasn't so infuriating. What do you want, Charles? He thrust the roses toward me like a shield. These are for you. Your favorites. I went to 4 different shops to get enough because I wanted you to know how sorry I am. How much you mean to me. I didn't take them. Didn't even look at them. Flowers don't fix betrayal. You know that, right? You can't buy your way out of this with grand gestures. His face crumpled slightly, but he lowered the flowers and set them carefully on the floor beside my door. When he straightened, there were tears in his eyes. Real ones, I thought. Though I'd lost my ability to trust my own judgment where Charles was concerned. You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right, but I needed to try something. Anything to make you understand how devastated I am. How much I hate myself for what I did to you. What exactly did you do to me, Charles? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I want to hear you say it. All of it. He swallowed hard. I cheated on you. With Jacob. For 2 months. I lied about where I was and what I was doing. I took him to places that were supposed to be ours. I said things about you to him that weren't true, that weren't fair. I hurt you in ways that can't be undone. The confession was clinical, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror, perfecting the right balance of remorse and accountability. It should have felt like progress. Instead, it felt hollow. Why? I asked simply. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in peaks. That sounds like a cop-out, I know. But Mason, I genuinely don't understand what was wrong with me. We were happy. You were everything I'd ever wanted. And then I met Jacob, and it was like I became someone else, someone reckless and selfish and stupid. You're still being dishonest, I said flatly. You know exactly why you did it. You just don't want to say it because it makes you look worse than the story you've been telling yourself. His jaw tightened. What do you want me to say? The truth. The real reason. Not this, I don't know what came over me nonsense. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then something shifted in his expression. A crack in the facade. A glimpse of something raw and ugly underneath. Fine, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You want the truth? I felt inadequate. Every single day I felt like I was failing some test I didn't know I was taking. You have this incredible career, this sharp mind, this way of moving through the world, like you own it. And I'm mediocre, average. The guy who peaked in college and has been coasting ever since. I hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected him to go there. To that vulnerable place I'd always suspected existed but he'd never admitted to. So you cheated to feel better about yourself? I kept my voice neutral, analytical. To prove you could attract someone? That you still had value? Maybe. He looked at the floor, at the roses, at anything but me. Or maybe I wanted to sabotage something good before you figured out I wasn't worth your time and left me for someone on your level. That's insane, I said. I never made you feel inferior. I never compared you to anyone or suggested you weren't enough. I know. The words burst out of him with surprising force. That's what makes it worse. You were perfect. Supportive and kind and patient with all my bullshit. And I repaid that by proving I was exactly as worthless as I secretly believed myself to be. The self-flagellation should have moved me. 6 months ago it would have. I would have pulled him close and told him he was wrong. That he was wonderful, that I loved him exactly as he was. But now, knowing what I knew, it just sounded like manipulation. Another performance designed to elicit the response he wanted. I can't do this, I said, starting to close the door. His hand shot out, stopping it. Wait, please, just tell me what I can do. How I can fix this. I'll do anything, Mason. Therapy, couples counseling. I'll cut off every friend who ever knew about Jacob. I'll move to a different city with you. Whatever it takes, there's nothing you can do, I said, because the problem isn't about Jacob or the cheating, or even the lying. It's about trust. And you shattered mine so completely that I don't think all the therapy in the world could piece it back together. So that's it? His voice broke. 4 years and you're just done? You're not even gonna try? I tried for 2 months while you were sleeping with someone else. I said. I tried every day when I asked how your day was, and you lied to my face. I tried when I texted you that I loved you and you were probably reading it while you were in bed with him. I've been trying, Charles. You're the one who gave up. He flinched like I'd hit him. I never gave up on us. Not once. Jacob was a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. But I always knew I'd come back to you. You're my home, Mason. You're my person. No, I said quietly. I was your safety net. Your backup plan. The sure thing you could return to whenever your excitement with Jacob wore off. And I deserve better than that. For 3 weeks my phone lit up every morning at 7:30. With the same message. Good morning, Mason. Still here. Still waiting. Still love you. Charles had apparently decided that persistence was the path to redemption. Though I never responded to a single text, I threw myself into work with an intensity that worried my colleagues. Stayed late every night. Volunteered for the projects nobody wanted. Filled every empty hour with tasks and deadlines, and anything that kept me from thinking about the gaping hole where my relationship used to be. My boss actually pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. I told her I'd just broken up with my partner and needed the distraction. She'd given me a sympathetic look and stopped assigning me new cases. But the truth was, I didn't know what I needed. Part of me missed Charles desperately. Missed the morning coffee ritual we'd developed. the way he'd read me articles from the newspaper while I showered, the weight of his arm around me while we watched television. Another part of me felt relieved, lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying a burden I hadn't realized was there until I set it down. On a Tuesday evening, I stopped at the grocery store on my way home from work. I was standing in the produce section, trying to remember if I had any vegetables left in my refrigerator or if they'd all rotted during my 3-day breakdown, when I heard someone say my name. I turned. Jacob stood a few feet away, a basket over his arm containing what looked like ingredients for a stir-fry. He wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, and he looked uncertain, like he was debating whether approaching me had been a mistake. "Hi," I said, because someone had to break the awkward silence. "Hi." He shifted his weight from foot to foot. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly, I have no idea." I grabbed a bag of spinach without really looking at it. "Some days I'm fine. Some days I can barely get out of bed. Today's somewhere in the middle." He nodded like he understood. "For what it's worth, I've been there. Different situation, but the feeling's the same. Like you're walking around with this wound that everyone can see but nobody mentions." We stood there among the vegetables and the other Tuesday evening shoppers, and something about the mundane setting made it easier to talk. "Charles is still texting me," I said. "Every single morning. Same message every time." Jacob's expression darkened slightly. "Has he called you?" "No. Just texts. I think he knows I wouldn't answer if he called." I paused, studying Jacob's face. "Why do you ask?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Because he's been calling me. Late at night, usually around 2 or 3 in the morning. I haven't answered any of them, but he leaves voicemails. Long rambling ones where he sounds drunk and says he misses me." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. "He's been calling you? While texting me that he's waiting for me? That I'm the only one he wants?" "Yes." Jacob looked genuinely upset. "I thought you should know. I blocked him after the first week, but before that I listened to a few of the messages. They were—" He stopped himself. "What? What were they?" "Pathetic," Jacob said quietly. "And manipulative. He'd go from saying he couldn't stop thinking about me to saying he was doing this to get closure so he could fully commit to winning you back. It was like listening to someone try on different stories to see which one fit best." I set down my basket, no longer interested in grocery shopping. "Did he ask you to take him back?" "In some of them, yeah. In others he just wanted to talk about what we had. How special it was, how confused he felt. Classic having his cake and eating it too behavior." Jacob ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I know this is awkward as hell, running into each other like this, but I also know what it's like to be lied to by Charles, and I couldn't stand the thought of you believing his reformed boyfriend act when he's still playing games behind your back." We ended up at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the grocery store. Our abandoned shopping forgotten, the cafe was quiet, just a few students hunched over laptops and an elderly couple sharing a scone. Jacob ordered us both coffees. He somehow remembered I took mine black and we sat at a table by the window. "I want to apologize again," Jacob said once we'd settled. "I know I already did, but it doesn't feel like enough. I helped him lie to you. Even if I didn't know the full extent of his deception, I still participated in it." "You were lied to as well," I pointed out. "He told you we were basically over, that I was emotionally unavailable and we were just going through the motions." "I should have questioned it more," Jacob insisted. "Should have asked to meet you, or insisted he end things officially before we continued. But I didn't, because it was easier to believe his version where I was helping rather than hurting." I studied him across the table. In the coffee shop's warm lighting, he looked younger than I'd initially thought. Maybe 25 at most. There was an earnestness to him that I'd missed in our first meeting, probably because I'd been too overwhelmed to notice. He seemed genuinely remorseful, genuinely concerned about making amends. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "And I need you to be completely honest." "Of course." "Did you have feelings for him? Real ones, I mean. Or was it just physical?" Jacob considered the question carefully. "At first I thought it was real. He was attentive and funny, and being with him felt exciting in a way nothing else in my life did. But looking back now, I think I was more in love with the idea of being someone's choice than I was with Charles himself." "Does that make sense?" It did. More than I wanted to admit. "The thing is," Jacob continued, "the more I learned about him, the less I actually liked him. He was charming when things were going his way, But the moment there was conflict or difficulty, he shut down or redirect. He never wanted to have real conversations about where we were going or what we meant to each other. And whenever I pushed, he'd bring you up as this get-out-of-jail-free card. Like, I can't commit to you because I'm technically still with Mason, but also I can't fully be with Mason because I have feelings for you. It was exhausting. That sounds familiar, I said dryly. He's excellent at keeping everyone in limbo, never fully committing to anything or anyone because that would require actual vulnerability. Jacob nodded. Exactly. And honestly, Mason, you dodged a bullet. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you're better off without someone who treats relationships like chess matches. The conversation shifted then, away from Charles and toward safer topics. Jacob told me about his job as a graphic designer, how he'd moved to the city 3 years ago to escape a small town that felt suffocating. I told him about my work, about the cases that kept me up at night and the small victories that made it worthwhile. It was easy, talking to him. Easier than it should have been given the circumstances. The phone call came on a Thursday night, 3 weeks and 4 days after the restaurant incident. I'd been home for maybe 20 minutes, had just changed into sweatpants and was contemplating whether I had the energy to cook or if cereal counted as dinner. When my phone rang with Charles's name on the screen, I almost didn't answer, but something, curiosity or maybe just exhaustion with the whole situation, made me pick up. "We need to talk," I said before he could launch into whatever speech he'd prepared. "Yes." His voice was eager, hopeful. "Yes. Absolutely. Do you want to meet somewhere? I could come to you, or we could go neutral territory, whatever makes you comfortable." "Charles, stop." I sat down on the couch, suddenly tired. "I'm not meeting with you, I'm calling to tell you that this is over. Completely, finally, irrevocably over." Silence. "Then what?" "No, Mason. Please just let me." "Jacob told me you've been calling him." I interrupted. "Drunk calls at 3 in the morning, telling him you miss him, asking him to reconsider, while simultaneously texting me every morning about how I'm your only priority and you're waiting for me to give you another chance." The silence this time was different. "Guilty. Those calls didn't mean anything," he finally said. "I was drunk, I was lonely, I was lying to me again." My voice came out flat, emotionless. "You promised you'd cut all contact with him. You swore that if I just gave you space and time, you'd prove you'd changed. And less than a month later, you're calling him in the middle of the night." I didn't think he'd tell you. The words slipped out before he could stop them. And in that moment, I saw the truth so clearly it was almost funny. "So you're only sorry you got caught. Again. Not sorry for doing it. Just sorry that it didn't stay secret." "That's not. I didn't mean it like that." He was scrambling now, and I could picture him pacing whatever room he was in, running his hands through his hair the way he always did when he was stressed. "Here's what I think happened," I said, my voice calm and clinical. "I think you genuinely believed you could manipulate both of us. Keep me on the hook with promises of reform while keeping Jacob available as backup in case I didn't take you back. You wanted options, insurance, a guarantee that you wouldn't end up alone no matter how this played out." "No, that's not true. I love you, Mason. I've always loved you." "You love the idea of me," I corrected. "You love having someone stable and reliable who makes you feel like you're doing life right. But you don't actually love me, the real me with Mason boundaries and expectations. Because if you did, you never could have done what you did." I heard him start to cry. Real sobs that would have broken my heart a month ago. Now they just made me tired. "I can change," he choked out. "I swear I can be better. Just tell me what you need, what you want, and I'll become that person." "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You shouldn't have to become someone else. You should already be someone who doesn't lie, who doesn't cheat, who doesn't play games with people's hearts. And the fact that you think you can just decide to change into that person tells me you don't understand how fundamental these flaws are." "So what, you're just giving up? After 4 years you're not even willing to try?" The question made anger flare in my chest, hot and sudden. "I'm giving up? I stayed faithful while you were building a whole separate relationship. I trusted you while you lied to my face every single day. I planned our future while you were actively destroying it. Don't you dare accuse me of giving up when I'm the only one who ever actually tried." "I tried," he insisted weakly. "No, you performed. You played the role of devoted boyfriend while simultaneously auditioning for the same part with someone else. That's not trying, Charles. That's hedging your bets. Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was small, defeated. Is there anything I could say that would change your mind? No. Is there anything I could do? No. Then why are you even talking to me? Why not just block my number and be done with it? It was a fair question. I'd asked myself the same thing. Because you deserve to hear this directly. You broke something in me. Not permanently, I don't think, but significantly enough that it's going to take time to repair. And while I'm doing that work, I need you completely out of my life. No texts, no calls, no showing up at my apartment with flowers. If you care about me even a fraction as much as you claim to, you'll respect that boundary. And if I don't, if I keep trying, then you'll prove that this was never about love, just about your ego and your fear of being alone. I heard him take a shaky breath. I really did love you, you know. That was never a lie. Maybe, I conceded, but love without respect, without honesty, without basic decency, that's not enough. It was never going to be enough. I ended the call before he could respond, then immediately blocked his number. It felt anticlimactic, the way huge life moments often do. I'd expected to feel something dramatic, relief, or sorrow, or anger. Instead, I just felt empty, hollowed out, ready to be filled with something new. My phone buzzed. A text from Jacob. Coffee this weekend. No agenda, just thought you might want company. I smiled despite myself and typed back. Yes. Saturday afternoon? Perfect. I know a place. Saturday came wrapped in crisp autumn sunshine. I met Jacob at a cafe I'd never been to, tucked away on a side street I usually walked past without noticing. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at an outdoor table with 2 cups of coffee and what looked like a journal. I got you black coffee, he said as I sat down. But I also got sugar and cream packets, just in case you've changed your preferences in the last few weeks. Black's still good. I took a sip, grateful for the warmth. What's that? I nodded toward the journal. He looked almost embarrassed. I've been writing about everything that happened, trying to process it. My therapist suggested it. He paused. There's some stuff in here about you, things I realized while I was writing. Would you want to read it? I hesitated. Is this going to be awkward? Probably. He pushed the journal across the table. But I think maybe we're past worrying about awkward, don't you think? He wasn't wrong. I opened the journal to a random page and read, Mason deserves someone who sees his worth, without him having to prove it constantly. Someone who doesn't treat his kindness like weakness or his trust like a given. Someone who knows how rare it is to find a person that genuine and holds on to him with everything they have. Someone like, maybe me?